The universe had never known fear, at least not until now. Across the galaxies, an eerie, unexplainable silence fell. Planets that once hummed with life and trade now stood abandoned, their inhabitants retreating into hiding. The stars themselves seemed to dim, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible. The dark, cold void of space had always been a mystery, but now it was something more, something terrifying. In every corner of the galaxy, civilizations known for their intelligence, strength, and power turned inward. They whispered of a signal, a cry so chilling it shook the very core of existence. It was as if the universe itself had screamed out in terror. Some called it the cry of the void, a signal that echoed across the stars, warning of an ancient darkness awakening. A darkness that consumed everything in its path, leaving nothing but silence in its wake. Fear spread like wildfire, and every species in the known universe shut their doors, locked their gates, and turned off their lights. But not humanity. The Perseverance stood on the edge of space, a lone ship against a galaxy of fear. Commander Jack Winters stared out at the vast, uncharted expanse. The stars twinkled like distant jewels, and yet the darkness felt heavier now. He knew what was coming. He had read the reports, felt the fear creeping into the hearts of his crew. But he had made a decision. The kind of decision that only humans could make. He wasn't going to run. Humanity wasn't going to hide. They would face this, whatever it was, head on. In the briefing room, Winters stood before his crew, the ship's most talented officers. They were nervous, yes, but they weren't afraid. Not like the others. They had seen the terror in the eyes of the galaxy's greatest minds. They had heard the whispers of the void. And yet, here they stood, ready to board a ship and venture into the unknown. "Listen," Winters began, his voice steady. "I know you're scared. Hell, we're all scared. But this is what we do. We charge forward when the rest of the universe runs. We don't hide in the dark. We walk into it." He paused, watching as his crew listened. Some nodded, some clenched their fists in defiance. They understood. They weren't just soldiers or scientists. They were human beings. And that meant something. Everyone else is hiding. But not us. We're going to face this, whatever it is, together. The tension in the room eased, just a little. The Perseverance wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol. A reminder of humanity's strength to survive, to push through when all others fall. As the crew prepared for departure, Winters felt a flicker of hope. Maybe the universe had cried out in terror, but humanity would charge into the darkness, unafraid. The Perseverance was ready to launch, but there was still one crucial task left to do: gather the crew. Commander Jack Winters stood in the observation room, his eyes scanning the star-streaked horizon. In the silence of space, the weight of his mission began to feel heavier, pressing against his chest. He wasn't just leading a mission to explore unknown space. He was leading a crew into the heart of darkness. They would face the unknown force head-on, and he had to make sure the people by his side were ready. Humanity had always been a species defined by its diversity. Different races, backgrounds, skills, each one offering something unique. But this mission required more than just skill. It needed people who could stand firm in the face of terror. The team he was about to assemble would have to be fearless, no matter the cost. Winters began with Dr. Elena Cruz, a brilliant scientist whose knowledge of alien technology and space-time theory was unmatched. Her eyes gleamed with an intensity that matched his own. She had already scanned the signal from the void and had theories about its origin. But the truth was, no one knew what they were truly up against. "Dr. Cruz," Winters greeted her as she entered the command center. "We're going into the unknown. I need your expertise more than ever." Elena met his gaze, determination in her voice. "I've been studying it for weeks, Jack, but we're not just dealing with a cosmic event. This feels like something alive, something that thinks. Whatever it is, It's smarter than us, but it's never encountered humans before. That's our advantage." Winters nodded. She was right. Humanity's creativity and adaptability were their strongest weapons. As long as they could stay ahead of the unknown, they had a chance. Next, Winters approached Sergeant Michael Hayes, a seasoned combat leader. He wasn't the typical soldier. His calm demeanor and sharp instincts had earned him the trust of those around him. He had seen the horrors of war and had always come out on top. If anyone could handle whatever awaited them, it was Hayes. "Sergeant, I'm counting on you to keep this team together when things get tough," Winters said, his voice serious. Hayes smiled, though his eyes remained focused. "We'll get through it, sir. The crew's tough. I'll make sure they stay that way." Winters could feel the weight of leadership pressing on his shoulders, but he couldn't falter. Not now. With Alina and Michael on his side, he knew they had a chance. Finally, he turned to his chief engineer, Sarah Patel. She was young, but had an uncanny ability to repair and build anything that could be needed in the most impossible situations. No ship or system was beyond her reach. "Sarah, you're going to have your work cut out for you," Winters said. "The Perseverance is equipped, but I'm sure we'll face problems beyond anything we've prepared for." Sarah gave him a confident grin. "There's always a way to fix things, sir. I'll be ready for whatever comes." With his team assembled, Winters felt a spark of hope. They weren't just a crew. They were humanity's last stand. The mission ahead was dangerous, and there was no turning back. But these were the people who would face the darkness, not as soldiers or scientists, but as humans. Their courage, their resourcefulness, and their determination would be the driving force that would carry them through whatever lay ahead. As the Perseverance prepared to depart, the crew gathered in silence, ready to journey into the unknown. Whatever awaited them, they would face it together. The Perseverance slowly glided away from the docking bay, its engines humming with a quiet power that contrasted the storm brewing beyond. Commander Jack Winters stood at the bridge, eyes fixed on the dark expanse ahead. The stars were scattered like distant fireflies, but their light seemed weaker now, dimmed by the unsettling presence of the unknown. The universe, once vast and full of promise, now felt cold and empty. "Commander, we've cleared the outer rim," Dr. Alina Cruz reported from her console. "We're officially entering uncharted space." Winters nodded. There was no turning back now. The crew had prepared for weeks, running drills, studying maps, and trying to predict what they might encounter. But nothing could prepare them for what lay ahead. The galaxy had never faced an enemy like this. Whatever the void was, it wasn't a natural disaster. It was something alive, and it had been spreading across the stars, devouring entire civilizations. The ship's instruments flickered briefly, as if sensing something out there, something that made the very fabric of space shudder. The darkness around them grew thicker, like an oppressive blanket that pressed in on the ship. It wasn't just the absence of stars. It was a presence, a malevolent force that seemed to pull at the very heart of the crew, making them uneasy. "We've detected some strange gravitational waves," Sarah Patel, the chief engineer, called from the back of the room. "Nothing like I've seen before. It's messing with our sensors." Winters turned to her. "How bad?" "It's hard to say," Sarah replied. "It's not a black hole, but it's pulling us in. If we don't adjust our course, we could drift off track. It's like the gravity wells are. Alive." The words hung in the air like a warning. The crew had been briefed on the strange phenomenon, but facing it head-on was another matter entirely. The force wasn't just manipulating the ship's instruments, it was affecting them too. And as the ship continued to sail deeper into the unknown, they could feel it. The air on the ship grew heavier, as though something was pressing down on them from the outside, slowly tightening its grip. "Adjust course, Sarah," Winters ordered, his voice calm but firm. "Keep us steady." Sarah's hands flew over the controls, trying to override the ship's systems and regain control. The Perseverance shuddered as if struggling against some invisible force. The crew exchanged tense glances, aware that any mistake could send them spiraling into the abyss. "Commander, the readings are becoming erratic," Elena said, her voice tinged with concern. "This isn't just a gravitational anomaly. Something is distorting the very space around us." Winters stood tall, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The crew had trusted him to lead them into this unknown darkness, and he couldn't afford to let them down. "Keep moving forward," he said, his voice strong. "We need to understand what we're dealing with. We can't turn back now." The ship continued its slow, methodical journey through the dark void, but with each passing minute, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. It wasn't just the ship's systems that were being affected. The crew felt it too. The cold chill ran down their spines, as though unseen eyes were upon them, studying them, waiting. In the quiet of the bridge, Winters could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. It was the only sound in the deep silence of space, and it reminded him of one undeniable truth. They were alone. Alone in the vast, endless dark, with only each other to depend on. And somewhere out there, in the shadows of the universe, the void waited. The Perseverance continued its journey deeper into the heart of the darkness. The stars, once bright and full of life, were now barely visible, hidden behind a thick, inky blackness that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The ship's crew could feel the weight of the unknown pressing in on them from all sides. No one spoke much, and every movement aboard the ship was accompanied by a sense of unease. Commander Jack Winters stood at the front of the bridge, his eyes focused on the flickering monitors. They had been traveling for hours, but the void around them had not let up. If anything, it seemed to grow thicker. The ship's engines hummed steadily, but even the sound of the ship's power seemed to fade in the unnatural silence that surrounded them. Suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped loudly, breaking the silence. "Commander," Dr. Elena Cruz called, her voice tense. "I found something. A structure, off to our right. It's massive." Winters turned sharply. "A structure?" he asked, trying to hide his disbelief. "Out here?" "Yes," Elena replied, her fingers flying over the console. "It's not natural. The readings are strange. This isn't any planet or ship we know. It's old. Very old." Without waiting for permission, Winters motioned for Sarah Paddle to adjust the ship's course. "Take us in," he said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The Perseverance slowly altered its path, heading toward the unknown structure. As they approached, the dark shape began to take form, emerging out of the darkness like some ancient titan rising from the depths. The crew could see it now, a colossal alien city, abandoned and decaying. Its buildings were tall, jagged, and covered in layers of dust. The airlock systems seemed inactive, and there was no sign of any movement. It was as though the place had been forgotten for eons. "Are we sure this is safe?" Sergeant Michael Hayes asked, his voice quiet but filled with concern. He was no stranger to dangerous situations, but this was different. The very air seemed to hum with something ominous. "We don't have a choice," Winters said, his voice steady. "We need answers. This might be our only chance." The Perseverance docked cautiously at one of the station's docking bays. The crew gathered in the airlock, checking their suits and equipment. Winters could feel the weight of the moment. They were the first humans to set foot on this alien structure. It wasn't just a test of their courage. It was a test of everything humanity had ever been. As the hatch opened, the crew was greeted by a thick, cold air. The room beyond was dimly lit by flickering lights. It was obvious that the structure had been abandoned for centuries, if not longer. But as they moved forward, Elena noticed something strange. "There are signs of life," she whispered, pointing at the walls. "These markings, they're not natural. Someone, or something, was here recently." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, their weapons ready, their senses alert. They had entered the unknown. There was no turning back now. As they moved deeper into the structure, they came upon a large chamber. At the far end, in the center of the room, was a strange alien artifact. It glowed faintly, and despite the decay of the station around it, it seemed to pulse with energy. This must be what they were protecting, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. But before anyone could react, a low hum filled the air. The floor beneath them trembled, and the lights flickered. The artifact, once dormant, now pulsed brighter, casting eerie shadows around the room. And then, as if the walls themselves were alive, the shadows began to move. The room seemed to hold its breath. The strange artifact pulsed with an eerie light, casting flickering shadows across the decaying walls. The air around the crew felt charged, as if something was awakening. The humming sound grew louder, vibrating through the floor beneath them. For a moment, it felt like the entire structure was alive, its ancient heart beating once again. "Everyone stay alert," Commander Jack Winters ordered, his voice steady but low. He glanced at his crew, making sure they were all ready for whatever was about to happen. The calm in his voice masked the turmoil within him. This wasn't just an alien artifact. It was something that had been hidden for centuries, possibly millennia. And now it was awakening. Sergeant Michael Hayes kept his hand on his weapon, eyes scanning the room. "Something's coming," he muttered. "I can feel it." The artifact seemed to respond to their presence, the pulse growing stronger with each passing second. Winters took a step forward, instinct telling him to approach it. As he moved closer, a low growl-like sound filled the air, almost as if the structure itself was warning them away. "We're not backing down now," Winters said, more to himself than to anyone else. His words weren't just meant to inspire confidence in his crew. They were a reminder that, no matter the cost, humanity would not run from what lay ahead. Elena Cruz, who had been studying the artifact from a distance, suddenly stepped forward. "There's a message," she said, her voice filled with wonder and disbelief. I can almost hear it, but it's not in any language I know. It's more like a feeling, a sense." Winters moved beside her. "What does it say?" "I don't know," Elena replied, her fingers tracing the air around the artifact, as if feeling the vibrations of its pulse. "But it's asking for something. It's like it's calling to us." The crew stood in silence, each one feeling the weight of the moment. They had traveled farther than any human ever had, and now they were on the verge of uncovering something far beyond their understanding. And yet, despite the fear that gripped their hearts, none of them turned away. "We came here to face this," Winters said firmly, "and we will face it together. No matter what happens next, we move forward." The room seemed to grow colder, the shadows deepening. Then, a sharp crack split the air, and the walls of the chamber began to shake. The pulse of the artifact reached a crescendo, and suddenly, a figure appeared in the center of the room. It wasn't a human figure, nor was it an alien. It was something different. The figure was tall, cloaked in shadows, its form shifting and changing with every blink. It didn't speak, but its presence filled the room, overwhelming and suffocating. "We are not afraid," Winters said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Whatever you are, we will not back down." The figure tilted its head, as if studying him. For a moment, there was silence. Then the hum of the artifact faded, and the figure began to speak, but not with words. It spoke directly into their minds. "You are not the first to come here, humans, but you are the first to stand and fight." The voice in their heads sent a shiver down their spines. The message was clear. They were not alone in this struggle, but humanity had something that no one else had, its unyielding spirit. And now, it was time to prove it. The room fell silent after the figure's voice faded from their minds. The air was thick with tension as Commander Jack Winters stood at the front, his mind racing. The alien figure, whatever it was, had just spoken to them in a way no one had ever experienced. There were no words, no sounds. It was as if the very presence of the entity had communicated directly with their minds. It felt both powerful and unsettling. "Commander," Alina Cruz said, her voice shaky but resolute, "we need to understand what it wants. This isn't just a communication. It's a test. But I think it's offering us something, or warning us. This structure, this artifact, it's more than a relic. It's a key." Winters nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "A key to what?" "We don't know yet," Alina said. "But the message is clear. This place, this artifact, holds the answers. But we need to act quickly. I've been studying the energy readings, and the artifact is stabilizing. It won't stay like this for long." The tremor beneath their feet returned, stronger this time. The walls creaked, and the low hum of the structure deepened, as though it was waking up. The pulse from the artifact was now steady and rapid, almost like a heartbeat. The crew could feel it vibrating through the floor and in the pit of their stomachs. "We don't have much time," Sergeant Michael Hayes said, his voice low and tense. "If that thing is about to go critical, we need to do something before it explodes, or worse." Sarah Patel, the ship's chief engineer, glanced nervously at the readouts on her portable device. "The structure is unstable. It's pulling more energy than I've ever seen. I'm not sure how long we can stay here without risking everything. But there is one thing we can try. It's a long shot, but if we can connect the artifact's energy flow to the ship's core, we could stabilize it, maybe even unlock whatever is hidden inside." Winters turned to Sarah. "Do it. If this is the key, we need to see what it opens. But be ready for anything. We don't know what this artifact could do." The crew scrambled into action. Sarah quickly got to work, hooking up her device to the artifact. The tension in the room rose with every passing second as they waited for the system to sync. Alina was beside her, guiding the process with steady hands, while Hayes kept a lookout, scanning the chamber for any signs of danger. Minutes felt like hours. The artifact's hum grew louder, its light flashing intermittently, sending shadows dancing across the walls. The crew could feel the pull of the structure, as if it was trying to drag them in deeper. The force was unnatural, the weight of the unknown pressing harder with each passing moment. "There," Sarah exclaimed. "I've made the connection. It's drawing power from the ship, stabilizing the artifact's energy. We've done it." But as soon as she spoke those words, the room plunged into darkness. The artifact's pulsing light was extinguished, and the entire structure seemed to shudder violently. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber, followed by a deafening silence. The crew braced themselves, hands on weapons, prepared for the worst. Then, a flash of light, brighter than anything they had ever seen, illuminated the room. The figure, once shadowed and unclear, now stood before them fully revealed. It was no longer formless. It had taken shape, an ethereal being made of light and energy, its eyes glowing with an ancient, knowing power. And it spoke again, but this time there were words. "You have unlocked the path. The universe watches. Your journey is just beginning." The figure's presence filled the room, overwhelming them with its power, but the crew stood firm. This was just the beginning. They had made their gamble. And now, they would learn what lay ahead. The figure in front of them shimmered with an energy that seemed to reach beyond the room, beyond the ship, and into the very fabric of space itself. It wasn't like anything the crew had ever seen. Its form was both solid and ethereal, made of shifting light that pulsated with an ancient power. Its eyes, glowing with a soft, otherworldly light, locked onto Commander Jack Winters. The air around them crackled, charged with an energy they could feel deep in their bones. For a moment, no one moved. The crew stood frozen, mesmerized by the figure's presence. It was as if the very atmosphere had changed, the air thickening with the weight of what was happening. The darkness around them seemed to recede, but only for a moment, revealing the full extent of the alien structure. It was massive, too large to be contained in the confines of the chamber they stood in. It felt as though the building itself was alive, its architecture shifting, expanding, breathing. Then the voice came again, this time more forceful, vibrating directly in their minds. You are the first to stand against the darkness. Why? The crew could feel the question echo in their thoughts, demanding an answer. The tone was not one of malice, but curiosity. It was as though the figure wanted to understand why these humans had dared to come here, when so many others had fled before. Commander Winters stepped forward, his mind racing, but his resolve unwavering. Because we don't run, he said, his voice clear and steady. Humans don't give up. We fight for what we believe in, even when the odds are stacked against us. We don't fear the unknown. We face it. The figure seemed to consider his words, its glowing eyes narrowing slightly. The energy around them pulsed once more, brighter and more intense. Then it spoke again, its voice now full of purpose. Then you will face the greatest trial. The darkness you seek to understand is not just a force. It is a test of your spirit, your will, and your resolve. It is the void, an ancient entity that consumes everything in its path. Those who encounter it are forever changed. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. Winters felt a shiver run down his spine, but his voice remained steady. We understand the risk, but we've come this far. We're not turning back. The figure paused for a long moment, as if contemplating their words. Then it moved, stepping closer to them, its form shifting and changing as it did. With each movement, it seemed to grow more real, more solid. The air around them grew warmer, but the tension in the room tightened. Very well, the figure said, its voice no longer echoing in their minds, but speaking aloud, clear and undeniable. You will face the void. But remember, only those with the strength to resist the darkness will survive. And just like that, the figure began to dissolve, fading into a cloud of glowing particles that disappeared into the walls of the chamber. The crew stood in stunned silence, unsure of what had just happened. The only sound in the room was their own breathing, heavy with anticipation. The darkness outside the chamber seemed to stir, as if the void itself had acknowledged their challenge. It was waiting. Winters turned to his crew, his face determined. We've been given a chance. The void might think it can break us, but we will prove that it's wrong. We are humans, and we don't give up. As the crew made their way back to the ship, the gravity of their situation began to sink in. They were not just facing an unknown force. They were about to challenge something older and more powerful than anything they had ever imagined. But one thing was certain. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And they would fight until the very end. The Perseverance drifted back toward the heart of the alien structure, the crew now fully aware of the peril they faced. The air was thick with uncertainty. Despite everything they had learned, the threat of the void was still beyond their comprehension. The entity that had spoken to them had left its mark on them, physically and mentally. But the message was clear. The true battle was not one of weapons or technology. It was a battle of will, of spirit. Commander Jack Winters stood at the bridge, staring out into the inky blackness ahead. The stars were now barely visible. The darkness was so complete, it felt as though they had crossed into a new realm altogether, a place where time itself was unsure of its own existence. Commander, Alina Kruz's voice broke the silence. The void is closing in on us. It's like it's everywhere now. The space around us is warping. We can't keep going without risking getting pulled into it. Winters didn't answer immediately. The truth was, he had already been considering their options, and none of them were good. There was no clear way to fight the void. No weapon could stop it, and no shield would hold against it. All they had was their resolve, the one thing that had carried humanity through centuries of adversity. Get ready, he finally said. We're going in. Sarah Patel, the ship's chief engineer, looked at him with wide eyes. Are you sure, sir? We don't know what will happen when we engage with it. We could lose everything. Our ship, our crew. We might lose everything anyway. Winters said grimly. But if we don't face it now, we'll never know if we could have won. There was a long pause. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but there was no turning back now. They had come this far, and they were going to see it through to the end. The ship's engines roared to life, and with a powerful surge, the Perseverance pushed forward. The crew could feel the pressure building, the pull of the void growing stronger with each passing second. The walls of the ship seemed to vibrate, the sound of the engines now a distant hum beneath the overwhelming force surrounding them. Suddenly, the darkness ahead began to take shape. At first, it appeared as a flickering shadow, but then it formed into something far more terrifying, a massive, formless black mass that seemed to be both alive and dead at once. It pulsed with an unnatural energy, sending waves of dread through the ship. It was the void, in its purest form, an ancient and unstoppable force. "Brace yourselves," Winters shouted, his voice sharp and commanding. The crew strapped in, their hands clenched on the control panels, their hearts pounding in their chests. The ship trembled as it entered the heart of the void, and for a moment, everything felt wrong. The laws of physics seemed to bend, and the very space around them began to twist in strange, impossible ways. The figure from the alien structure, the one they had encountered earlier, appeared once more, its glowing eyes fixed on them. It seemed to be waiting, watching them as if to judge whether they were worthy of continuing. "This is the moment of truth," the figure's voice echoed in their minds. "Do you have the will to resist the void? Can you fight it, or will you succumb to its pull?" The crew exchanged looks of determination. This was their test. The battle wasn't about defeating the void, it was about resisting it. About standing firm in the face of overwhelming odds. It was about the human spirit, the will to fight against the darkness that threatened everything. "Together," Winters said, his voice steady, "we fight with everything we have." As he spoke, the crew locked their eyes on the void ahead, focusing their minds and hearts on a single purpose: to resist. To refuse to bow to this ancient terror. The ship surged forward, and the crew braced for whatever came next. For the first time, the Perseverance wasn't just a ship. It was a symbol of humanity's resilience, a testament to the strength that lay within them. And as they faced the unimaginable force of the void, they knew one thing for certain: they would not surrender. Not today. Not ever. The Perseverance strained against the crushing force of the void, the ship's hull groaning under the immense pressure. The darkness around them seemed to stretch forever, pulling at the very fabric of space. It wasn't just the physical force. They could feel it in their minds too. The void was trying to break them, to make them doubt, to make them lose their resolve. But they stood firm. Commander Jack Winters stood at the helm, eyes focused ahead. The ship trembled under the weight of the void's influence, but Winters refused to let the fear take hold. He had led his crew this far, and now, in this moment, he had to lead them through the most terrifying challenge they had ever faced. "Steady," Winters said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to hold our course. No matter what happens, we move forward." Sarah Patel, the ship's chief engineer, looked at the readings, her fingers flying across the control panel. "Commander, the void is pulling too much power from the ship. We're losing fuel faster than we can generate it. If we don't act soon, we'll be stranded here." The tension in the air was suffocating. Winters knew what Sarah was implying. If they didn't do something drastic, the ship wouldn't survive. They would be lost, helpless in the heart of the void, with no way to escape. He turned to his crew. They were all struggling, fighting to keep their systems operational. But the void was relentless. It wasn't just a force of nature. It was intelligent, probing their weaknesses, exploiting their fears. The walls of the ship seemed to shift, the stars outside fading away, leaving them isolated in an endless abyss. "Alina," Winters called, his voice steady but with a hint of urgency. "Can we override the systems and redirect power to the core?" Alina Cruz, the ship's brilliant scientist, shook her head. "We could, But it's too dangerous. It would require all the remaining energy we have to keep the ship intact, and even then, we don't know what it will do to the artifact's energy. It could make the void stronger. Then we have no choice, Winters said, determination hardening in his voice. We have to make the sacrifice. I'll do it. The crew looked at him, confusion and disbelief on their faces. They all knew what he was implying. He was willing to give up his life to save them, to save humanity's only hope. Commander, no, Sergeant Michael Hayes said, stepping forward. There's got to be another way. We can't lose you. Winters gave a sad smile. I'm the one who led you here. If this is how it ends, then it ends with me. But you need to trust me. You all have the strength to survive this. You just need to believe. Sarah Patel's voice trembled. We can't let you do this. There has to be another way. Winters looked at his crew, the people he had come to see as family. He knew they weren't ready to say goodbye. But he also knew that in this moment, he had to be the one to make the ultimate sacrifice. It wasn't just about saving them. It was about proving that humanity's will could not be broken, no matter the odds. I'm doing this for all of us, he said quietly, to give you the chance to survive. You can't give up. Promise me you won't. One by one, his crew nodded. It was a silent agreement, an unspoken pledge that they would honor his sacrifice and continue the fight. Winters turned toward the ship's core, where the energy needed to be redirected, the final step in their desperate plan. As he activated the control, a blinding light filled the ship. The void's influence seemed to intensify, but so did the pulse from the artifact, now synchronized with the ship's core. Winters felt the surge of energy course through him. His body trembled, but he kept pushing forward, knowing that this was the only way to stop the void. For a brief moment, the darkness lifted. The void screamed in rage, but it was already too late. The energy, powered by the ultimate sacrifice of one human, had shattered its hold. Winters fell to his knees, his body giving out as the final surge of energy burst from the ship's core. His last breath was one of relief. He had done what needed to be done.